Okay, power also can have toxic effects on individual, but it depends on the individual personality. Research suggests that if we have an anxious personality, power does not corrupt us, because if we have anxious personality, we always anxious about our behavior, our action, whether it is correct or whether it is wrong. So anxious personality, person who have anxious personality, uh, they are less likely to think that using power can benefit themselves. So corrosive effect of power can be contained in the organizations if the persons exercise power that can be corrosive, can be toxic. These can be contained by the system in the organizations. According to the study, one study found that power made people behave in the self-serving manners. What is meant by self-serving manners? Self-serving manners, we have touched this in chapter 4 or chapter 5 regarding we tend to say the good things happen because of us, the bad thing happens because of the external factor. So in the organizations, if this person have power, they tend to think that they deserve to have power, and then others do not deserve to have power. So they tend to exercise this kind of power in the wrong directions. However, in the organization, there are systems which could contain this kind of persons to behave against their accountability that been given to them. So when accountability of this behavior was initiated, actually the accountability, maybe the organizations provide the system telling that the person should be accountable for their behavior, so this self-serving behavior will be stopped. So we have the means to reduce the negative effects of power. According to the study, the negative effect of power can just simply reduce by giving some gratitude towards powerful others. So if we showing our gratitude toward them, or those who have to have powers, make them to become less likely to act aggressively against others. So basically, if we thanks them, feeling showing our grateful to them, uh, could actually make us to actually could affect us in the positive way, because this could avoid or prevent this person who have power to act aggressively against us. So there's a cliche or aphorisms that's stated that those with little power grabs and abuse uh, tend to basically that those with little power grabs and abuse is actually more more threatening. So what is meant by those with little power grabs and abuse is actually those who just receive power from previously didn't have power, suddenly they receive power. So they are low in status, suddenly just receive power. They likely to abuse the power that they just receive. So people in the many people tend to say that those who are coming from lower level in status and they just receive the big power, they tend to abuse the power, because based on this aphorism, they said those with little power grabs tend to abuse the power. So people most likely to abuse the power if they are having low in status and suddenly gain power. So why it is the case? Why those who are lower in status tend to abuse power? Because it appears that having low status is actually threatening to them, and this fear is actually used in a negative way if power is given. So basically, those who are lower in status, if they just receive power, they likely to abuse the power that they've been given to them, because having a lower status is actually threatening, and this fear of being in the lower status actually can be used in a negative way if they will be given power. So there are factors that can restore the negative effects of power, but however, power generally have positive effects. Especially power can energize people and can also motivate them to achieve goal. For example, in terms of motivations, power can actually motivate others to help others. Power can motivate to help others, at least to certain people, even if not to all. So it's not so much of the power corrupts as actually is based on people with strong moral identity. So if power is actually neutral, but it's depend on the individual who possess the power. So if the individual have strong moral identities, so the power that they possess can be good, can have a positive effects on others. So it's depend on the persons who possess the power. For those with a strong moral identity, power actually could enhance their moral awareness and willingly to act to help others, or to the benefit of others by exercising their power. Okay, we move to these new topics related to sexual harassment. It's also related to abuse of power. Also, sexual harassment can relate to the abuse of power, especially those who have power in the organizations. They can abuse the power by harassing others sexually. So, sexual harassment is defined as any unwanted activity of a sexual nature that affects an individual employment and create a hostile work environment. So in the organizations, if there is some sexual harassment or nature of harassments that affects those victims in terms of their employment, or create hostile work environments for the victims. For example, the victims feel uncomfortable to come to work because they've been sexually intimidated by the other person. So this also can be considered as a sexual harassment. So organizations normally in the past or currently have generally made progress toward limiting overt form of sexual harassment. So in the organizations, there are laws preventing employees to show overt kind of sexual nature or sexual behavior. Try to limit their sexual kind of displaying their sexual behavior, because this kind of showing the sexual kind of behavior or impressions can actually make other people or other employees feel comfortable, which make them feel uncomfortable to work for the organizations. So this actually considered illegal. So sexual harassment is more prevalent in the male-dominated society. So in the male-dominated society, they tend to show their masculinity. So they sometimes exaggerately showing more of the sexual kind of gender. So it may not be or may not be interpreted positively by the opposite gender, by those from opposite gender. So most study also confirm that the concept of power is central to understand the sexual harassment. So basically sexual harassment also mostly occurred in large power differential, where there is a huge gap between followers and leader. So in the culture where there is a large power differential, when there is a huge gap between leader and followers, So leaders can exercise their power on their followers. Sometimes this leader can be corrupted, can abuse the power, and can also leads to sexual harassment because they think they are higher in terms of status and so on. So they tend to be sometimes off limits in terms of exercising their powers. So this can affect female if the female employees or followers in the groups. So managers have a responsibility to protect the employees. So in the organization, managers have a responsibility to protect their employees from a hostile work environment. So that's why sexual harassment is considered illegal, because it's actually the responsibility of the manager to provide a safe and health work environment. So any behaviors that are against these health and safe work environments, such as sexual harassment, should be the responsible of everyone's. Mainly, managers should provide should protect their employees from this kind of hostile work environments. But they are also need to protect themselves. What is meant by protect themselves? If they didn't aware, even though if they didn't aware, it does not mean that they cannot be held liable, because if they are not aware, it's considered as it still feel guilty, because ignorant doesn't mean that you can free from the sentence, or ignorant is not an excuse to free yourself from the punishments. So it is important for the manager to protect their employees. Even though the managers are not aware, they still be held reliable because of their ignorance of the problems. So the followings are some ways manager can do to protect themselves and their employees from sexual harassment, by making sure that an active policy would define what's constitutes sexual harassment. They have to inform the employees, the rest of the employees. They need to have active policy that could tell the employees that those who ever happens to be to show sexual harassments, or to be in this kind of position to initiate that sexual harassment, can be fired, or can be fired for sexually harassing another employees. So employees who initiate sexual behavior toward others, if others complain about this sexual harassment being done by the others, so this person can be fired for for doing that. So it is the organization also need to establish procedure for how complaint can be made. Sometimes the victim want to complain but do not know how to complain, or the procedure also can be so lengthy, can prevent the victim from complaints about the sexual harassment. So organizations or managements should establish easy procedure for how complaint can be made. So it is important for the organization to reassure the employees that they will not encounter retaliation if they issue a complaint. So especially for a women in the organizations, if they experience sexual harassment, or if they are harassed by their male counterparts, the organization have to reassure these employees or the victims that when they want to complain, they will not encounter retaliations. Retaliations, that mean they will not be punished if they come up to complain about their colleague regarding the sexual harassment that they receive. Okay, so this basically the example of sexual harassment in the organization. Is not only faced by women, can only faced by men, or between women and men, or between men and men, or men and women. Women also can harass men sexually, or men also can harass other men sexually, or men can harass women sexually. Normally in the organizations, women receive more sexual harassment compared to the